What do you think a gallon of gas costs in Venezuela? What do you think? What do you think a gallon of gas costs in Venezuela? Now, they charge $3 and some change here in the United States for a gallon of gas. In Venezuela, according to globalpetrolprices.com, this is a service the International Monetary Fund relies on, globalpetrolprices.com, a gallon of gas in Venezuela goes for 13 cents. $3 and some change here in the States. In Venezuela, for a gallon of gas, some change, 13 cents. We know as of Friday, officially, that there have been 3 American airstrikes on Venezuelan speedboats. Donald Trump, on Friday, announced he's releasing information now, these days, from the Pentagon. Trump boasted that the 3rd airstrike took out 3 more people, bringing the total number of alleged Venezuelan drug smugglers and narco-terrorists killed by our military to 17. The War Powers Act mandates Trump give Congress a heads up before these strikes. He has failed to do so. And he must offer proof to the so-called Gang of 8 inside Congress. He must prove to them that these targets were who he said they are, something he has also failed to do. As I said on my last show, even conservative Republicans like Senator Rand Paul are warning that Trump is illegally using our military to perform jobs reserved for American and international law enforcement. It is not the military's responsibility to fight drug use. They can't even do it within their own ranks. And it is against international and American law for our military to fire on civilian boats, even if they're criminals. You can't fire on criminals unless they fire on you first. These boats must be given ample opportunity to prove they're not enemy combatants. And if somehow they are enemy combatants, you must first ask them to surrender. Even if these boats are narco-terrorists, which I doubt they are entitled to a trial under international law. But I suspect the reason our military was ordered to blow these ships up is because by doing so, the military also incinerated any evidence of possible war crimes they are now committing. The 3 airstrikes were done under the cloak of darkness with zero transparency, and now things are about to get even more opaque. Pete Hegseth, our defense chief, on Friday signed a 17-page memorandum making it illegal for any journalist covering the Pentagon with press credentials to report anything other than what Pete Hegseth tells them to report. According to this memorandum, in order to become an accredited reporter, allowed access inside the Pentagon, permitted to show up for press briefings and ask questions, to talk with military personnel inside the building, you must first swear an oath. You must swear an oath to never report any news, to never report any contents of any internal documents, even if they're unclassified, unless it's been officially cleared by, you guessed it, Donald Trump. American reporters are essentially being ordered to swear an oath of loyalty to our commander-in-chief before gaining any access to anyone or anything inside the Pentagon. And if you break that oath, presumably you're subject to some sort of punishment. Now, should a journalist refuse to take that oath, they're not allowed inside the Pentagon. Should a journalist agree to take that oath, they are no longer a journalist. Let me repeat. Should a journalist refuse to take that oath, they're not allowed inside the Pentagon. Should a journalist agree to take that oath, they are no longer a journalist. Reporting what the Pentagon wants the American people to know isn't journalism. Hegseth defended his order by taking to Twitter saying, quote, "The press does not run the Pentagon, the people." Well, that's a lie. Pete Hegseth, you run the Pentagon. Donald Trump runs the Pentagon. And under our Constitution, there is congressional oversight as well as a free and open press that asks questions, digs, and reports leaks so that the people know how the Pentagon is using our troops, our weapons, and our tax dollars. Our Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, in May of this year, fired 2 top officials inside the National Intelligence Council after they released a report concluding that despite Donald Trump's lies, despite his invoking the Alien Enemies Act, claiming we've been invaded by Venezuela, this report concluded that Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, according to this intelligence report, he is not shipping Trinidad gangs into our country to murder, rape, kidnap, deal drugs, and steal our natural resources. That report exposed our president's lies, so it was buried. And the people who wrote it, they were fired. If you have a son, a daughter, husband, wife, brother, sister, or grandchild in the military, you already know about this and you're alarmed. If you are none of the above, I suggest you visit your local VA hospital and ask a wounded soldier to tell you why this is not good. Don't listen to ex-generals who are quietly paid lobbyists for the defense industry going on all the major news networks boasting about these Reaper drones and Apache attack helicopters, how these generals who are lobbyists for Raytheon and Boeing, they'll promise we're furnishing our nation's treasure, our men and women in uniform, with the safest and most powerful machinery known to man. Don't listen to them. Talk to the soldiers, which Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump don't want you to do. One of the ways the right convinces our military to close ranks is by spreading the lie that the left hates our troops. That creates an us versus them mentality where them isn't necessarily the enemy, them is the American people, or at least certain segments of our population. It's one of the oldest tricks from the fascist playbook. We constantly hear now of ICE agents being physically assaulted by Democratic members of Congress or protesters, and that's a lie. Go to ice.gov. It has a page listing their fallen comrades. Check it out. The number of ICE agents, with some rare, unfortunate instances, especially down in Texas, and it's wrong, but the number of ICE agents getting injured on the job is minuscule compared to other police work, compared to a lot of other jobs like electrician, construction worker, or female White House staffer. But by spreading the lie that ICE agents are under assault, it creates a brotherhood, a sisterhood inside ICE and inside the Pentagon, where you have this unwritten code that says lips are sealed, don't talk to the media, they hate us. This is all yet another in a series of restrictions imposed by the Trump administration to make sure the press can't report anything contradicting Trump's official story about Venezuela or any of his other military incursions in Iraq, Yemen, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles. Yes, military incursions in Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles. Real, actual soldiers on the ground in the streets of America. Even before Hegseth's loyalty oath memorandum, one of his first acts as defense chief was issuing an order that forbids reporters from gaining physical access to Pentagon offices. This way they can no longer meet personally off the record with any Defense Department officials. Reporters are now restricted to the Pentagon's food court for their meals, and then they must return to the designated press area. Now, government agencies traditionally provide what are called dedicated workstations inside their headquarters for members of the media. The Capitol, the White House, even state houses and city halls across America have dedicated workstations for the press, so the American people can learn what is being done in their name. Obviously, not anyone is entitled to these dedicated workstations. It's generally agreed that access to these workstations are provided to members of the media who have the largest audience. But at the same time, they have to be actual journalists. In February, however, the White House granted press credentials not to journalists, but to far-right pundits, so they could ask questions during the daily briefings held by Caroline Leavitt, the White House press spokesman. Among the so-called journalists granted press credentials were Laura Loomer, Tim Pool, Jack Posobiec, and Benny Johnson, who, because of the First Amendment, are free to opine on the news and even report on the news. But these are not journalists the same way I'm not a journalist. I don't belong inside a White House press briefing or the Pentagon. That's the domain of fact-based journalists who provide the nuts and bolts so the American people and clowns like me can assemble an opinion. Inside the Pentagon, back in February, NPR, the New York Times, NBC News, and Politico were stripped of their dedicated workstations to make room for reporters from far-right Breitbart, the New York Post, a right-wing rag owned by Rupert Murdoch, the far-right One American News Network, and in a disingenuous attempt to appear balanced, the Huffington Post. With roughly 100 reporters and pundits around the world, the Huffington Post these days is aggregating and commenting on news more than reporting it. People don't get their news anymore from the Huffington Post. They get their opinions. What we're witnessing now, especially in the left-wing media, are massive cutbacks and reporters staying home, watching MSNBC or CNN, and then writing about what was said by high-profile members of Congress and pundits appearing on those networks. Many of these reporters work from their homes, copying and pasting press releases prepared by publicists for these networks and celebrities, written in the style of an actual news article. American wars tend to last for as long as the president and his generals can maintain the lie. The Pentagon Papers came out in 1971. Within 2 years, America began leaving Vietnam. Bush invaded Iraq in March of 2003. In July of that same year, Ambassador Joe Wilson published an expose in the New York Times revealing George W. Bush lied during his State of the Union address, ginning up the invasion when he said, quote, Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. It was a lie. Saddam Hussein didn't. Within months, because of reporting like that, or because of the expose written by Joe Wilson, Congress and the American people began to turn against the war. Not the troops, against the war. Again, we didn't pull out until 8 years later, but Bush was reined in, exposed as a liar, not to be trusted, disgraced even within his own party, and nobody was giving him any more permission to spread his version of freedom throughout the Middle East. Like all presidents before George W. Bush, during war, he tried to control and manipulate the media, and he failed. Eventually, he failed. Unfortunately, he succeeded in the lead up to the invasion. Aeschylus, the ancient Greek dramatist, wrote, "In war, the first casualty is truth." Actually, the first casualty is a soldier or a civilian. and then the truth, because the people running things must first lie about how the soldier civilian died in order to gin up that war. So, in war, truth isn't the first casualty, but it is a close second. It's kind of the same way they always say prostitution is the oldest profession. No, the oldest profession is pimp. Prostitution, a close second. There'd be no prostitutes if we didn't first have someone abusing women for profit. Calling prostitution the oldest profession is misogynistic because it implies women have been selling their bodies since the dawn of time. No, men have been abusing women since the dawn of man. And there, I invented one more thing you can be woke about. I'm not just staying woke right now, I'm getting more woke, because woke is an act of resistance. Now more than ever. Now more than ever, state your pronouns. Now more than ever, correct people's regressive language and behavior. Do not go to sleep, especially now. Stay woke. On a previous show, I described our nation's military airstrikes against what some believe were just fishing boats, but Donald Trump and his alcoholic defense chief, Pete Hegseth, insists these were narco-terrorists heading from Venezuela to America on small speedboats. If those speedboats can make it all the way from Venezuela to the United States, loaded down with cocaine and fentanyl, without a fuel stop, all the way from Venezuela to America on one tank of gas, I'm thinking Trump is destroying these boats on behalf of Exxon. Because if those narco-terrorists are coming to the States without stopping to fill up, they seem to be using some kind of mind-boggling alternative energy that's about to put the fossil fuel industry out of business. But I suspect those little speedboats are running on good old petroleum, especially since, as I said at the top of the show, in Venezuela, gas is incredibly cheap. Not just because that country has what is believed to be the largest untapped oil reserves in the world, but also because they completely and unequivocally nationalized their oil companies in 2007. While a gallon of gas in the United States costs roughly $3 and some change, as I said, in Venezuela, that same gallon of gas costs some change, about 13 cents a gallon. Granted, it's also subsidized by the Venezuelan government. It's cheap, though. Water in Venezuela costs more than gasoline. And by the way, here in the United States, there's so many petroleum products pouring out of our kitchen tap. One more year of Trump, and soon our cars will also be able to run just on water. But I digress. So no, gas is really cheap down in Venezuela. Those boats weren't using alternative fuels, and they most likely weren't heading to America with drugs. Again, drug smuggling is a criminal act under international and American law. It is fought using law enforcement, not the military, which means the people on those boats are innocent until proven guilty. The Pentagon has presented zero evidence that those people we killed were narco-terrorists. So until they can demonstrate otherwise, as far as I'm concerned, they were not narco-terrorists. Present the evidence. The American military isn't allowed to pick off people on the high seas just because Donald Trump says so. More importantly, given that Venezuela nationalized its oil back in 2007 and gas sells for 13 cents a gallon down there, a little birdie covered in goo from an offshore oil spill tells me this thing Trump has against Venezuela has nothing to do with drugs and everything to do about the price of gas. Because the second casualty of war is truth, And reporters inside the Pentagon must now literally take loyalty oaths. We don't know much other than both the United Nations and our own intelligence agencies have concluded that cocaine is not coming into this country from Venezuela. So this isn't about drugs. Let me ask you all a question about Tren de Aragua waging war on American cities, which President Trump claimed when he signed the Alien Enemies executive order. Do you for one second think that ICE has the capacity to raid an actual nest of international narco-terrorists operating inside our country? You've seen what these ICE agents look like. That's not what they do. They're trained to detain innocent men, women, and children. The tough jobs are for the DEA, the ATF, and the FBI, which is why very few of the people inside those ICE detention facilities have ever in their lives been charged with a crime here in America or back in their country of origin. If ICE were rounding up the worst of the worst, which they're too chicken shit to do, those gang members wouldn't be sent back to Venezuela. That's not how it works. In what universe does America catch a narco-terrorist or a rapist, murderer, and then send them back to the country that's invading us so they can prosecute them? Does anyone actually think that's how we deal with an invading army? When German spies were caught during World War II, do you think J. Edgar Hoover shipped them back to Nazi Germany so Hitler could prosecute them? Is that how you think we deal with enemy combatants? Is that how you think we deal with murderers and narco-terrorists? We bring them to America. El Chapo is here in the United States. We brought him to America. Mexico is shipping narco-terrorists to America to be tried here. We want them here. We don't put them on an airplane back to the people who sent them to invade us. And it makes me angry that Trump, Kristi Noem, Tom Homan, Pete Hegseth think the American people are so stupid they believe this. It makes me even angrier that the American people are so stupid we believe this. And the more restraints Trump places on the media, the more stupid we become. In September, our new director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, ordered our national security agency to bury a classified report on efforts by Nicolas Maduro, the head of Venezuela, his attempts to jumpstart some kind of peace negotiation with the United States, with Rick Grenell. Maduro is offering to present evidence that, no, I have not invaded your country. I'm not trying to flood the United States with enemy combatants. But a story like that undermines the narrative that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are pushing. And that narrative is not just that Venezuela is itching for a fight. They've already invaded us. That's the narrative. And in Trump world, you either sing from the same hymnal or you're excommunicated. The current leader of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, is the handpicked successor to General Hugo Chavez. You might remember him. He died, but before dying, he kicked ExxonMobil, Gulf Oil, as well as several other climate destroyers out of his country, seizing their assets while telling them this oil belongs to us, not American and British-led multinational corporations. That was an act of war. They're not shipping fictitious drugs into our country. They're not sending fictitious marauding gangs into America. Venezuela essentially declared war on America by announcing in 2007 that the oil underneath them belongs to them. How dare they? Not only that, but they're also charging their own people 13 cents a gallon for that oil. Imagine if news like that ever got around. Imagine if the American people found out the oil companies are gouging them and that the crap only costs 13 cents a gallon. I know people say, well, it's 13 cents a gallon in Venezuela because that government is subsidizing the oil companies. Right, and America isn't? Forget the tax breaks and the free leasing of our public lands. We're dipping into our Pentagon's budget right now to get Venezuela's oil back for American oil companies. How is fighting a war for oil not subsidizing the oil companies? And yes, I said it, fighting a war for oil. It sounds so effing cliche, a war for oil. It is a cliche, and it's not a hot take. It's the same old, same old. I'm not telling you so much as reminding you of something you already know. You know this isn't about drugs, it's about oil. And I hate being the guy who thinks he's being fresh and original by saying it's about oil, because there's nothing fresh and original about any of this. Although I have a sneaking suspicion most of you didn't know a gallon of gas is 13 cents in Venezuela. This is about oil. But the President of the United States can't go on national television and say to the American people, you know that thing that's causing all the fires, hurricanes, floods, and tornadoes? You know the thing that's creating millions of refugees worldwide, driving up the cost of home insurance? You know that thing that's poisoning our lungs and water, lowering your children's IQ, and costing us trillions in lost productivity and broken infrastructure? Well, I want to use our military, our troops, your sons and daughters, the people I hide behind. I want to use them. I want them to put their lives on the line to topple Venezuela and install a regime that promises to return that nation's oil to its rightful owner, the rightful owner being the people who donated to my campaign and have secretly made all of my most vocal supporters filthy rich, the oil companies. You see, he can't say that. So he says it's about drugs. It's about criminal gangs. This is what Venezuela right now is all about, oil. The thing that should stay in the ground, the thing that makes billions for the people who don't care who dies from or for it. I know I sound like the self-serving pretend soothsayer who flatters himself by believing he's breaking new ground, telling his audience something they've known for years. The truth is, we fight wars for oil, and we're not going to stop fighting them for oil just because it's hackneyed. I wish I could say this is over artificial intelligence, that Venezuela developed a large learning model that Elon Musk wants to get his hands on because it threatens Grok. I really wish I could be telling you that this is all about Grok and AI and not oil. Because war for oil sounds so turn of the century, 21st and 20th century. So look, the mafia killed Kennedy, or let's just say the mafia wanted Kennedy killed because his old man promised them his son would use our nation's military to steal back their casinos in Cuba. And Kennedy tried with the Bay of Pigs, but after that failed, he figured it was enough of a thank you note to the mob for delivering Chicago in the 1960 election. I tried, Bay of Pigs. I tried to get you back the casinos, but I'm not doing anything more for you. And the mafia said, you don't understand. We want our casinos in Cuba back. They belong to us, not the Cuban people. Is that why Kennedy was killed? How the hell do I know? Yes, it's why he was killed. At least it's one of the reasons he was killed. And how do I know Oswald didn't act alone? Because before Kennedy was even pronounced dead, the government was already keeping things secret. How do I know these attacks on our Venezuelan ships are not what Trump or Pete Hegseth say they are? Because reporters are being forced now to take loyalty oaths. You don't need reporters taking loyalty oaths when you're telling the truth. Much the same way the mafia was promised by Joseph Kennedy that if his son was elected, he would use our nation's military to get them back their Cuban casinos, Trump most likely promised the oil companies he's going to get them back their Venezuelan oil. Let's be clear. Venezuela nationalized the oil companies in 2007, the way Iran tried to in the 1950s, and we know how that ended. It ended with our CIA getting involved. Since Exxon's oil in Venezuela was confiscated by those silly Venezuelans who think just because oil belongs to them, it's theirs, Exxon has been in the courts for nearly 20 years trying to get reimbursed. Headquartered in Texas, Exxon filed a series of international lawsuits against the Venezuelan government to get reimbursed for what Exxon believes are their assets that Venezuela seized. Exxon wants to be reimbursed, but we can't get reimbursed by Exxon. We tried. We filed lawsuits. We lost them. We can't get reimbursed by Exxon for the trillions of dollars in damages Exxon inflicted on the world by hiding scientific evidence going all the way back to the 1950s and all the way until the end of the 20th century, scientific evidence prepared by Exxon's own climatologists proving beyond any doubt that Exxon was heating up the planet, and heating up the planet isn't going to end well. That's what their climatologists warned them. And Exxon had this information going all the way back to the 1950s. We can't sue them. It took Exxon decades before they finally obeyed a court order and paid the fishermen and indigenous people of Alaska for the 1989 oil spill in Prince William Sound, and Exxon paid them far less than what they were initially ordered to pay. But when Exxon finds out its claims are being tied up in the courts, then we have to go to war. The World Bank ordered Venezuela to pay Exxon several billion. Venezuela actually did reimburse Exxon for slightly less than $1 billion, as ordered by the World Bank, but Exxon keeps taking Venezuela to court, insisting they are owed way more money. ConocoPhillips, another oil giant, got the World Bank to rule that Venezuela owes that company $8 billion. Venezuela refuses to pay ConocoPhillips. So, this is about oil, money, and profits. And we can't allow Venezuela to nationalize its own oil because it sets a dangerous precedent. When you allow countries to keep their own natural resources, pretty soon we'll be living in a world of social justice and no massive inequality. It starts with Venezuela owning their oil reserves, but before you know it, the rest of Latin America will want to own their coffee and banana plantations. So Venezuela and the oil companies right now are tied up in the courts, kind of like those civil judgments against Trump for defamation, sexual assault, and ripping off banks and lenders. The difference is Venezuela has actually paid some of those judgments. So far, Trump has not. Oil money. Oil money. Remember I was talking about the mafia putting Kennedy in office because his father promised to use our military to get the Cuban casinos back? The Guardian reported in October of last year that the Trump campaign received about $14 million in legal cash donations, from fossil fuel industry and executives. It was far short of the $1 billion Trump demanded from them in March of that year, last year, during a meeting with oil lobbyists down in Mar-a-Lago. According to the Washington Post, Trump told the oil lobbyists to give him $1 billion, calling it the best investment they will ever make. Well, legally, they can't donate $1 billion. What they can do is donate quietly to super PACs, dark money super PACs. They can donate to think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, which gave us Project 2025. They can channel secret money to content creators, pundits, politicians, and news personalities who brainwash low information voters on behalf of the Republican Party. You don't donate directly to Donald Trump because that money won't go towards reelecting him. You donate to all the people and organizations out there funded by entities who have a vested interest in Donald Trump becoming president again. Now, you ever wonder how your neighbor, your moronic brother-in-law, believes the nonsense? I mean, they really do believe it. This is how and why. It's the oil companies, primarily, right-wing think tanks, pundits, podcasters, content creators, hosts of popular radio and television shows are financed secretly by fossil fuel companies through shell corporations and nonprofits that make it really hard to trace their funding back to the fossil fuel industry. It's why they call it dark money. That's how it's done. There are campaign finance laws limiting how much a corporation or a corporate executive or a billionaire can donate to an individual candidate and party, but there is no limit to how much those oil companies and their wealthy stockholders can donate to far-right propaganda machines posing as think tanks, news-gathering operations, podcasts, and content creators. There are no limits to how much a super PAC can spend on issue ads that appear in mainstream media, issue ads that spread falsehoods about man-made climate change and the Democratic Party. So, while Trump himself didn't get the $1 billion he demanded from the oil companies last year, you can be certain the oil companies paid his MAGA universe hundreds of millions of dollars last year so they would parrot their talking points. There are no laws preventing someone like Tucker Carlson or anyone on AM talk radio or hosting a podcast from receiving checks from corporations or nonprofits set up in the dark web of right-wing money. Find out who's funding PragerU. The people receiving the money, these mouthpieces for the right wing, have no legal obligation to reveal who's secretly paying them. Occasionally, because this money is sometimes funneled through nonprofit tax-exempt organizations, and we can read their returns, we get to see where the money is coming from and who's getting it. Let me put it this way. I am what is called a content creator. There are no laws forcing me to reveal who is paying me to spread lies about climate change or tax cuts for the rich. I could take a check from them, from the fossil fuel companies, the billionaires, and lie to you. Or I could flatter myself by insisting nobody is telling me what to say. But I would get paid way more money than I make all year doing this show for one speaking engagement at a college. And that fee, underwritten by a nonprofit secretly funded by the oil companies, that fee would make me want to do more of those speaking engagements that have theoretically nothing to do with my content creation. And I know who's really footing the bill. I begin seeing this show as a means towards more speaking engagements secretly funded by the oil companies. And without them telling me to, I parrot their talking points because I know that's exactly what will get me more of those high-paying speaking engagements. I become bought and paid for, but because I lie to myself and my listeners, I don't know it. So, is Donald Trump's war on Venezuela only about oil? Well, let's see. The first thing Trump did after returning to office is declare the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua a terrorist organization that he said is waging war inside America, committing acts of rape, murder, kidnapping, as well as stealing our natural resources. He said they are performing these acts of terrorism on direct orders from Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela. He said Maduro has ordered Tren de Aragua to dump fentanyl and cocaine inside America, get us all addicted to drugs in order to fund Venezuela's war against us. He signed executive orders invoking the Alien Enemies Act to justify rounding up Venezuelan gang members living in our country so they could be shipped off to that torture chamber in El Salvador. So, yeah, this is partly about Venezuela's oil. He wants to get rid of Maduro and replace him with the Shah of Iran, to put it succinctly. That way, the oil companies have access to quite possibly the largest oil reserves on the planet. But in the meantime, while he's doing this, he creates his own army of 10,000 ICE agents. That's what's in one big, beautiful bill. 10,000 new ICE agents. To do what? Immigration is down, and they answer solely to him. He also creates the illusion of wartime conditions, which traditionally allow American commanders-in-chief to concentrate more power inside the Oval Office, while at the same time chilling our freedom of speech, because when we're at war, anything critical of the president or the military or the war is not just disrespecting our troops and the flag, it's also considered high treason. It's considered aiding and abetting the enemy, even when there is no enemy. When most Americans believe we're at war, they are easily gulled into a paranoia born from fear. During war, so-called patriotic Americans, well, they used to line up to enlist. Now they just get in line. They do what they're told, watch what they say. It's in Donald Trump's best interests for us to think we're in a state of war. He can steal even more. How dare you question our commander-in-chief? Trump and Hegseth don't want you asking questions. So, what is news? When you ask real journalists, people who have been trained in the profession, they say real news is what the government, corporations, and powerful people don't want you to know. Now, of course, that's not the only definition of news. There's also reporting on what happened and what the government does want you to know, like a tidal wave is coming, run to higher ground. But much of the heroics in journalism is proving Bush and Cheney lied about weapons of mass destruction, or that Exxon destroyed evidence from its own climatologists that they were heating up the planet, that Harvey Weinstein is a rapist, and the Sackler family bought up the entire medical community to get Americans addicted to opiates. That's all the work of journalists. That's what truth-telling is. And it requires people who care about the truth and are trained to look for the truth. It requires lawyers to protect them and, of course, funding. That's who truth tellers are, the people who work for ProPublica. Theo Von telling millions of his listeners that his sister told him her left arm felt kind of weird after her COVID shot, that isn't truth-telling. Joe Rogan, Tim Pool, Candace Owens raising questions they don't know the answers to and don't want to know the answers to, that isn't truth-telling. Because if they really wanted to know the truth, they wouldn't be asking their audience these questions. They would be asking the people who could answer them. Their defense always, when they question how many people really died in the Holocaust, is, I'm just asking questions. No, you're asking rhetorical questions, which are statements hiding under the cover of a question. So, leaders of the Democratic Party who sit on the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee, are asking questions about these 3 Venezuelan airstrikes. No answers. Pete Hegseth and Trump insist they killed narco-terrorists. Well, that raises real, not rhetorical questions. How do you know they are narco-terrorists? How do you know cocaine and fentanyl were on board those speedboats? How does a speedboat make it all the way from Venezuela to the United States on one tank of gas, loaded down with drugs? Where were they heading to refuel? What intelligence were you acting upon? What is your legal justification for using our Navy to stop drug dealers when that falls under the jurisdiction of the DEA, the Coast Guard, and the FBI? Who gave these orders? Did lawyers inside the Pentagon advise against these airstrikes, telling you they're illegal? According to the Wall Street Journal, they did. According to the Wall Street Journal, Pentagon lawyers warned these airstrikes are illegal. They said there's now a paper trail proving that people like Pete Hegseth were warned they might be breaking the law by ordering our soldiers to commit illegal acts. Is that true? That's a good question to ask. Did Pentagon lawyers write memos saying that? Can we see the memos? Can you defend these airstrikes? Can you explain why 4,000 Marines, as well as several warships and fighter jets, have been moved to Puerto Rico and other parts of the Caribbean? Some are saying this is an expeditionary force preparing to invade Venezuela. Now, I know the military depends on the element of surprise, especially if there's going to be attack. Well, have you consulted with the Gang of 8 in Congress? If you can't tell us, have you at least told the Gang of 8 in Congress? Have you gone before the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, the House and Senate Armed Services Committee, to explain what your plans are as mandated by the War Powers Act? Nicolas Maduro, the head of Venezuela, has reportedly asked to negotiate with Ed Grinnell to head off this American invasion. Are there any peace talks with the Venezuelan government, or is this just regime change for the oil companies to create a climate of war so Donald Trump can gobble up our freedoms? Now, these are real questions. That's why we have a First Amendment. We have a First Amendment so we can not only ask real questions, but demand real answers from our government. The First Amendment also guarantees that the government can't use the weight of the FCC or the Justice Department to make sure the people demanding answers are fired and or arrested. I'm going to be talking about Jimmy Kimmel and Charlie Kirk on a future show. I want to give it time. Jimmy Kimmel is a comedian, and Charlie Kirk was Charlie Kirk. I'm talking right now about truth tellers, people who say and report things that have to stand up in a court of law or under sworn testimony before Congress. Although you can tend to lie, it's really hard to get busted for perjury before Congress. But that's where the truth so often is discovered, in a court of law or during congressional testimony, because even the vilest hypocrite knows there might be consequences to lying under oath. It's why when our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, when he was testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that Kilmar Abrego Garcia was a member of MS-13, he said that before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Maryland Democrat Chris Van Hollen asked, why weren't you willing to say that in the court documents you signed recommending he remain in El Salvador? Are you willing to say that under oath? So look, there's a lot of people scared right now. And the First Amendment is a muscle. If you don't use your First Amendment properly, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose freedom of speech if you don't exercise the muscle. The muscle of freedom of speech is not celebrating the assassination of a right-wing conservative pundit who you disagree with. You are free to do that if you want. But that's not the best use of your First Amendment. The best use of your First Amendment is to pay attention to what is being done inside the corridors of power and demanding answers. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Focus on what's important. Flame wars on Twitter, celebrating somebody's death, doesn't win us the midterms in 2026. Again, if you want to do that, go ahead. You're not helping our side.